Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here. Did this last year, and it's such an amazing event, and to be here in person without feeling that the world is momentarily not ending while we're in here is great. And the lesson I learned very quickly was don't eat the gummies or anything else before you do the panel, because that's probably a bad idea. So we're going to talk about this liquid arena that we seem to be in at the moment, and we're going to do this like a very elaborate train ride. We're going to start with one stop, and then we're going to bring up additional people to speak and introduce themselves. So I know we're a little short on time, so I think we'll really just dive into this and let each person introduce themselves. And first is Jake, and we're going to talk one-on-one for a few moments, and then we'll sort of go down the line. So hi, and thanks for being here.
Hello, yeah, thanks, Alex. Glad to be here. My name is Jake Bullock. I'm the co-founder, CEO of CANN. We make a range of microdose beverage products, so 2 milligrams THC in our core line. We have a 5 milligram THC product as well. And we're available for sale in California, Nevada, Arizona, Illinois, Massachusetts, and Farnsworth as well, and hopefully soon in New York. And we're kind of waiting on regs, but excited to be here today.
So this is really a new area, and this really exploded for you. I mean, you seem to have not only been the first, but also the first with a lot of celebrity, endorsements, a lot of investors that seem incredibly enthusiastic. How did you get here? What's it all about? And you're moving on up to Canada too, so there's a Canada connection as well.
Yes, I always forget about Canada, but it's
you got to remember the
important.
Canadians. It's all about the cannabis. That was my interpretation. You all missed it. Of being from Canada. Really? I know it's been 2 years, but seriously.
Yes, yeah. So we're an international, if you'll give us that.
It's very fancy.
Cannabis brand. But no, it's interesting. We were first. It's funny at the beginning. We sort of were like, we had this amazing idea. How has no one thought about this before? You take the dosing way down. You make it social. You unlock that potential to drink. Many of us are drinking coffee now. If you think about drinking a cup of coffee, we actually drink it in a microdose. That's how come you can have 3 or 4 cups in a day. The same idea for the beverage. When we got in it, we realized that, nope, lots of people have had this idea. It's really, really hard. And so what we were able to do is actually bring it to life through complex science challenges around the emulsion, the packaging, actually creating beverage canning lines in this very highly regulated licensed manufacturing environment, which is challenging. And then how do you cut through the noise? There's all sorts of things going on in the sort of CPG brand world, even more in cannabis, and there's some specific nuances about how you talk about cannabis, which is unique, right? We talk about effect a lot and when to take it and how to take it. We don't often talk about how it tastes, which for a food product is kind of strange. And so we tried to use things that we could do within the regulations, in this case, high-powered celebrities that sort of found the product interestingly. Early days in LA where we launched the brand, it became a running joke that it was impossible to find CANN. And we would have folks, from celebrities' teams reach out to us on Instagram being like, hey, how do I get this? And the reality is we could barely keep up with the supply to just kind of stay in the doors that we were in. And so that was an opening to have a conversation with folks that, in some ways are really naturally suited to a product like ours, folks in the entertainment industry who are hyper conscious about what goes into their bodies. If you're waking up at 4 a.m. for a shoot, you can't be hungover. And so the product worked really well in that environment, and we were able to capitalize on their love for the product and bring them in as investors, and then they can be part of the army that goes out and convinces consumers that they should try this for the first time.
And that, I think, is a nice segue because you guys have worked together before. So I'm wondering, Alexander, if you could introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your concept and being in the queer cannabis space and what you stand for and what your goals are, and then how you guys work together.
Great, thank you. I'm Alexander Farnsworth, and Farnsworth Fine Cannabis Company is a luxury brick-and-mortar retailer and CPG brand that is based in Massachusetts. And we always say that, if we could sell cannabis at the farmer's market, we would, but we can't, and so we put it on a pedestal in a museum-quality setting where everything is on display, and a cannabis concierge walks you through the showroom, and you really get the one-on-one white glove service. And so our customers range from 21 to 94, and we have a product that's perfect for each one of them. And when it comes to, say, beverages, CANN in particular is a product that I would recommend to anyone of any age because of its kind of low-dose approachability. So really, we're in the modern days of cannabis. And so concerning the queer aspect of our brand is that, you know, as queer owners and operators, it's just part of every decision that we make. And we felt like, you know, last summer and formally launched in January the Queer Cannabis Club, because it's the sheer simple importance of having the recognition and of having the platform. Because what we know is that the fight for cannabis equality and for other human rights has always been in tandem. And so it's part of our story.
And then how did you guys connect? Because that's a little bit of an interesting story as well.
We connected in Las Vegas.
As many people do.
In this
Yes.
industry, yes.
Luckily, what happened in Vegas moved on to other cities like
One
Aspen.
of the few times where it branched out.
And we were attending MJ Unpacked and went to CANN, had a great party with their law firm, which was surprisingly a really great party. You know?
That is, it feels like an oxymoron, doesn't
Yeah.
it? A great party with a law firm, so.
Yes. And I approached Jake and said, you know, we are launching this initiative and your brand is on our shelves and we do very well with it, and it's one that I love personally, and invited them to join us in Aspen where we formally launched the initiative. And I think what's important to note is that after we launched it, the Forbes piece was picked up and, you know, translated into Spanish and ran in Mexico City, it ran in Israel, and so it made me hyper aware that the need for queer representation in cannabis is really a global initiative.
Why do you think that is? Do you feel that it's just, I mean, and it's such a difficult time too, in terms of equal rights, in terms of where we are, in terms of the world feeling like it's on fire. But in this area specifically too, do you feel it's just an overlooked area, that they're just not represented?
Having recently returned from a trip in Egypt, and I know we're veering off a little bit of beverages now, but where I had to hide both my queerness and cannabis use, and Egypt being one of the top 5 growers and exporters of cannabis in the world, I think that cannabis has always been something that's been used around the globe for centuries. And I think America is the country that everyone looks towards for an example. And in the 70s, when our government was cracking down on drug laws, that ripple effect went into other communities, into other countries. And so as America hopefully can be a progressive leader,
We hope.
we hope, that both in New York with the regulations that are happening now and what's going to happen across the country are important on a global scale because they'll be looked at as an example.
And then in terms of how CANN, you know, made its way through this partnership, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the interesting things about the conversation we had in Las Vegas and the Queer Cannabis Club and some of the things that have come out of that is it resonated with me and my co-founder Luke. Both of us identify as queer, and you know, we felt very strongly in building CANN that one of the real challenges in fighting our own identity crises was the role that alcohol played in that, and substances broadly, but particularly for us, it was alcohol. And you kind of, we used it in ways that, upon reflection, were pretty problematic. And we didn't really know, and there wasn't products available like CANN that could maybe step into that. And what was, I think, particularly challenging is when we got to the point of sort of realization and resolution in that queer identity crisis, and we were met with a community of very actualized, proud queer people that were also using alcohol in ways that were problematic. And so it was kind of like this, like, well, now I feel like I've done all this heavy intellectual lifting on my identity, and yet I'm back in the same place of like overindulgence. And how do we balance that? It's not something that you resolve. It's sort of a lifelong struggle with society and being sort of outside of the norm. And some of that can be helped with normalization and fighting for human rights in different areas. But in one really small way, we can have products that are a little bit healthier. If I drink 20% less alcohol, that's probably a good thing for me and from a health standpoint. It's probably a good thing if we're all doing that as a society.
No, and I think addiction especially is rampant right now. So, and as the non-alcoholic beverages continue to grow, it's a huge space to capitalize on, which I think makes for a nice segue. So Darnell and Whitney, if you folks want to come up too, as the train pulls up to our second station.
The global train.
The global train, the cannabis train. So our threesome has become a fivesome, which is nice. So this is Whitney and this is Darnell, and I'd love for both of you to sort of introduce yourselves, and then Whitney, if you want to talk first just a little bit about, Supr. And I know that Jake very thoughtfully started with a little bit of coffee, and I'm like, oh my God, this is a great place to segue in. So clearly I've had some today. No gummies yet, but I've had some.
There you go. Start your day off super. My name is Whitney Eckis. I am the founder behind Get Supr. We are an instant wellness beverage company that primarily focuses in on water-soluble hemp extract and adding it into our instant wellness stick packs. So that's a little bit about what we are. We just launched in October, so we're super new, and we're having a great time, and this is actually our first trade show, so we're really honored to be here.
And then Darnell.
Yeah. So I'm Darnell Smith, founder of Moon. We are a non-alcoholic THC-infused spirit. So think analogous replacement for tequila, gin, and bourbon. And we really came at it that way just because we wanted to take aim at the cocktail occasion and give more options to enjoy cocktails that you already know and are familiar with, and really lean into the mixology bartender, home, mixologist set. So let's move.
So the same way that we were talking earlier, obviously, about the queer community, being a person of color, that's something you're quite passionate about, and I guess, too, feels unrepresented in terms of the space.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've dealt with that my whole career, working with, I founded a consulting firm that does work with Bacardi Incubation, Pepsi, Procter & Gamble Ventures, and I was always the person of color in the room. For me, it's become less of a thing just because I feel like I've always gravitated towards the coast, so it's naturally less of a thing. But yeah, obviously I feel it. You feel it when you're raising money. You feel it when you're, in settings like this even, right? It's not a whole lot of us. So yeah, absolutely. I feel the weight of representing for a group of people who I feel deserve much more access to the space than we're currently getting.
When you're that single person, though, do you find that it's helping you a little bit because you represent this unique and yet very thoughtful way of creating a product that really nobody else is doing in terms of bringing in the mixologist, in terms of bringing in some of your background? Do you find that's helping you just a little bit at least?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just constantly trying to create more opportunities for those who look like me as well, and really focused on trying to, bring light on the situation and use my skill in kind of where I've been to help others.
And then Whitney, being the female in this group, aside from myself, but I haven't created anything at the moment. Did you find that worked against you, was helpful? No one's really entered this coffee arena, and they're packets, right? So
yes.
you're adding to, you're adding to water or you're adding to existing coffee?
Yes, you add it to about 8 ounces of water. Hot or cold, it dissolves right away. I would say being a woman in this space has been awesome, honestly. I feel like I come from a marketing background. I actually have a creative agency that I've had for the last 5 years, and I come from the hospitality space, which is very, very just, I feel like, male-dominated. So having full creative freedom over our branding, over our brand voice was really empowering. And I think the way that we launched Get Supr was just this feeling of having fun and feeling a little bit better throughout your day. And that was actually created all by my marketing agency, which is all women. So I think that we saw Get Supr really shine with this new take and new brand voice because we had so much play. And we had this ability to really just do whatever we wanted and to kind of lean in a little bit to that feminine energy, which was awesome.
Do you all feel this was also the next logical step? So, you saw CBD and beauty products in the beginning, and then you saw this expansion into food and other areas, and somehow, we did come into this non-alcoholic creative space, and now I guess the CBD is the next added into this non-alcoholic space. Did you feel there was this logical movement, or maybe not? Maybe you just said, I have a great idea, let's go with it.
I can tell you from my beverage innovation background, the industry has seen this coming for a long time. Technology wasn't available to do it, but as soon as it did, obviously brands like CANN popped up, and trust me, I get calls from all the majors. They're keeping tracks on what we're doing. They can't touch us just yet, but they will. And they're just kind of waiting their time. So they've known this for a decade that this was coming, and they're waiting for the right time to get their foot in the mix.
And then to speak to some of the disadvantages, you're not allowed in a grocery store, right?
Correct.
So then where do you go?
Yeah, it's a fundamental challenge which we talk about a lot, which is the customer that is best served by CANN, our highest experienced customer, does not go into dispensaries on a regular basis, if at all. And where they do go are places that alcohol is available for sale. People that go into dispensaries have a very clear idea of a cannabis product that they want to purchase, or a category of cannabis products. And so there's a bind there, right? How do you get the folks that are walking down the street today, thinking about having a drink later tonight, to go into a dispensary when it's available here in New York? And that's a really big challenge. I think some of it is dispensaries get a little bit better. They get a little bit more attractive. They're in better locations. And some of it is what we're doing on the product side. Like, let's create amazing products that have energy behind them that attract folks to the dispensaries. And for the dispensary owners out there, like, we send people to your stores because they want to come buy CANN, right? Folks will go to Farnsworth from this city to buy CANN because it's actually, I think, maybe the closest place if you just put it into Google Maps. So, we can have some influence over that, but it is still really challenging.
So Alexander, how do you also decide what to have in the store, how to put it all together, what feels most efficient, most creative, what's going to appeal to people?
Well, we have a limited amount of space, and we are 100% dedicated to the brands that we carry.
How many brands would you say?
I would say the product mix is about 35 brands at this point.
And how many are traditional, as in weed, or products that have different components in it?
I would say about 15 of them are brands from the West Coast, brands that customers coming in from New York, or customers who have been to LA that they know and that they trust. And then a few are brands from Massachusetts, new brands. From the beverage space, once we have CANN on the shelves, we don't have room for another beverage that has some CBD in there, because we know that CANN is superior to those. And so it's about providing the customer with the best product possible, which is a concern when we hear our regulators in New York saying that dispensaries are going to be open at the end of this year, because I wonder with what product will they have to sale. And I know from us, what's really important from a retail perspective is we serve CANN cold. Because
fancy, too.
How else would you want it? Room temperature? No.
Because people want to drink it right then and there.
I think having the option to, picking up as a housewarming gift or going to a barbecue, it's important that you have the full experience of the product as intended.
Smart. And then, you're a liquid, but not a liquid. You're a powder, but so where do you fit into all this? How do you get seen?
Yeah, we have a little bit of white space to play with. I come from San Diego, so we are home of Liquid IV, and I was really inspired by some of the brands that came out of San Diego, Organifi, Liquid IV, and I loved the convenience of our instant coffee that also had our CBD inside of it. And I think it's been a question of, will we go into ready to drink? Will we, push into bigger flex packs or do larger base servings? And for me, I think the mission of Get Supr is to be able to have it when you need it most, for that little pick-me-up. And so I think with us, we'll always stay this instant wellness packet kind of product. And I think there we actually shine, because we do kind of stand out and we don't really have this direct vertical of where we fit in. You know, are we powder? Are we a beverage? What exactly are we? So I really would love to lean more into that and really expand that in itself as a product line.
Do you all see your products in that capacity as wellness, then wellness-based?
We don't lead with it per se, but obviously I think what we make is better for your system than alcohol. So in that sense, yeah.
And then what about the stores that are popping up that are non-alcoholic based, but they're offering all these crazy, interesting drinks as alternatives? Are you able to go into those spaces?
We can't sell them now. One of the challenges, you have to sell through licensed dispensaries, and so, you know, in theory, that that store could apply for a license.
Because they're not allowed to sell any of their products into a liquor store. And I don't know if they're allowed to be in a grocery store. So there are this new infiltration of these non-alcoholic spirits and other alternatives.
Yeah, it starts to get complicated fairly quickly of what can be sold where, but we're kind of at the very bottom. we have the most restrictions.
And I guess you all feel that, right? You all feel these restrictions on.
Oh, absolutely.
So then, you know, what keeps you in the business? How do you crawl your way out of these restrictions?
For us, it's the consumers. Like, we see it every day. It's one of these strange industries that feels like it is being pulled by consumers that are demanding these products in some ways, and they're doing it through all different ways. And we hear those stories from consumers that drink our product and have fallen in love with it and then now incorporate it into really a daily routine. And it's those consumers that keep us going through all of the challenges with distribution and regulations and the slow rollouts in many states where we kind of scratch our heads and think, well, you know, how can it take this long? It's those consumers that keep us going.
But Jake, what about unspiked? Because we have customers who come in looking for the CANN unspiked, which is without cannabinoids, right?
Right. We have a product where we basically sell the product with no THC or CBD, and we do that for a number of reasons. One, consumers love the flavor so much that we'll drink this every day. If it didn't have cannabis, I'd drink it in the morning. And so that product is one we can put in stores. We're available to a number of stores in New York, and it also helps us introduce the brand in a new market.
I have to jump in here. I actually had the idea of doing this with our signature instant coffee from you guys. So we launched with a signature instant coffee as well as our hemp-infused instant coffee so that we could approach digital marketing, we could approach different ways of advertising and introducing people to the product, therefore leading them to our hemp-infused instant coffee.
If you all had to make a prediction for what you're going to see over the next year or two, what would that be? Within the space. Unless you're all psychic and there's some stocks you want to tell us about.
I think I would say two things. I think over the next year, things will be a lot slower than we expect, but beverages will continue to be the fastest growing category.
And why is that? Because that's so fascinating. So for a while it was beauty products. You know, they really capitalized on, and what it was at the time, this white space. And they just bombarded. Everything has CBD in it now. Why do you think that this will be that next moment?
I think there's something core about beverage, right? We've spent thousands of years of human history socializing around beverage.
Very ritualistic.
It is, and it's that, and it joins with, I think, another really important trend, which is sort of visceral as well, which is our frustration with alcohol. And we're seeing this in the data, right? Younger people, millennials, Gen Zs that are old enough to consume alcohol are drinking a lot less of it. And so that intersection of cannabis curiosity and sober curiosity, I think beverage lives there. That's really when beverages are at their best.
Big predictions?
Big predictions.
More stores, more, more conferences, more places.
Looking more of like
to have
a decade prediction or 2-decade prediction. You'll be able to walk into any gas station in America and pick up a pack of Farnsworth cannabis cigarettes as a healthier alternative to tobacco. And in 20 years, in 2 decades, you'll be able to get CANN and Farnsworth and other brands in duty-free airports around the globe. But within the next year or two, I think that hopefully we'll have, in 2 years, a recreational dispensary open and perhaps a consumption lounge in New York. Massachusetts would be nice too, actually, if we could get consumption. But yeah, I think as Jake said, it'll take a little bit more time than people anticipate.
I think I'm gonna go more the wellness route. At least that's what I've been seeing in Southern California. I feel like we're gonna see a lot more of these wellness-based boutiques kind of pop up, where we're kind of having these mom and pops shops that want to offer CBD. They want to offer different variations, of cannabis products. And I feel like, our hope is that, big box retailers and things like that start opening their arms to us with everything that's happening in the government. But I think that we're going to see a lot more of these smaller base stores that really hone in on what wellness is and offer products directly to help people and better their lives.
So I'll piggyback on what Jake said. I think that macro economic environment may cause like a near-term slowdown, but I always say to brands and folks in this space, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And not to date myself, but I was helping Diageo launch RTDs back in 2006.
You did just date yourself,
right?
By the way.
Back in 2006, and I saw that fall on its face, right? And for it to all come back full circle, and you have brands like CANN now that are beyond that, is amazing to see. But again, if you saw the litany of brands laying on the side of the road since then, right, you'd understand that this is truly a marathon and not a sprint. So over the next 2 years, I don't think you'll see a ton of difference than what you see now. You'll see, hopefully New York will get its act together in terms of its legislation. Jersey just went online. I think Connecticut is not far behind. Massachusetts is doing its thing. So I think in the next 2 years, hope some of that gets sorted out, but my horizon is a little bit longer view than 2 years.
So when you see these other products laying at the side of the road, is there a piece of advice you can offer to everyone here who may be thinking of creating something liquidy or non-liquidy? What, biggest piece of advice or something you've learned along this way?
I think the key is don't get out over your skis, right? And you have to build a business that can withstand oscillations that are out of your control. And a lot of times brands get, ahead of themselves and they get out over their skis, and next thing you know, you're out of capital and you're, looking for the next savior. Whereas if you, take a step back and think about more long-term vision and what you need to do in order to exist 5, 10 years from now. For me, I was talking to someone earlier, like I've had the experience of creating a business that now does not need me anymore. Like I've been kicked out of it and it'll be here long after I'm gone. Trying to do the same thing with Moon, right? But it's gonna take time. And so, have patience. Don't get out over your skis would be the advice I would give.
Whitney, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree with you and the marathon and not being a sprint. I think, again, coming from this as a creative marketer, it was really eye-opening to all of the compliance and regulations that we have to jump through, especially, when the product itself is really aimed to help someone. So I think that when I look at Get Supr and I look at its longevity, it really is being patient and it really is aligning with the right partners that are going to help the brand to grow and to help it scale in a way where, with time, as these things come through and these new opportunities arise for us, we're able to sink our teeth in, but really stay aligned with who we need and keep them close as these things slowly roll out.
Alexander?
Yeah, I think we're in a unique position as a retailer and product manufacturer, where I've experienced, brands that are hot in Hollywood and they come to Massachusetts with the wrong partner and they have their pretty packaging on the shelf, but really the product is important, and so having to build state by state, adds to those challenges. But I think furthermore, as I said, in November on this stage, that have a vision and cleave to it, because with the regulations and the compliance and this and that the core messaging and the core product gets lost sometimes. And that, I think, as Jake said, it's a consumer-driven market. They're hungry for the products, And so from our retail perspective, the curation of the products becomes really important. And as we have more products available, then I think focusing on what is best, right? And I think the best will rise to the top.
Yeah, I would say, echoing a lot of what others have said, don't fall into the trap of trying to make a lot of money right now. Don't put more cannabis in your product because you can charge a higher price for it. There are a lot of these things that we know are going to happen in New York because we've seen them happen in other markets, but they didn't work or they're not working. And I think I would encourage folks to think about the consumer first and what they want, and take the slightly longer view on that, because ultimately, the short answer to it, to whether you should come into Beverage or not, is no. It's hard. If we would have known how hard it was, we wouldn't have done it. And it's not even a joke. Like it's very challenging. But what keeps us alive and excited is this ability to change the way people socialize. And we're not going to do that by scaring people away with really highly potent cannabis products, right? We're not going to do that by scaring people away with products that taste that grassy way that cannabis smoke smells. We're going to do it by creating something that's better than alcohol, that's more attractive. And so I think thinking about the consumer and taking the long view would be my advice.
I'd love to open this up to you folks, because I think you guys have a voice as well, and I'd love to hear if you have any questions. And if not, we may sing some show tunes. Yes?
I have a question specifically. Hey, I have a question specifically for CANN. So I'm sure there's a very long discussion about dispensaries and the type of customers that come as soon as the rec market opens, but do you see a big difference between the initial customers that go towards a beverage and the expansion and proliferation of the type of customer that's coming to a dispensary? Or do you find that, because it's not a product that the illicit market ever had, the people coming to it are more uniform in the beginning than, say, something that's transitioning?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it varies by market. So what we saw in California and Nevada is very different. As you move east, interestingly, people are more interested in categories that are not smokables. I think that's a lot because folks in Chicago and Boston are drinkers. Out here, we're drinkers, and so that's part of it. Also, California has had pretty open, safe access for 40 years. But I think what's interesting about the question is it actually changes within a market as well. So in the early days, you get this sort of voyeur customer, and this is like a first timer. This is somebody that wants to see what all the fuss is about, and they come in with their ID for the first time into a dispensary. That person should not be walking out with any high concentrated THC product, probably not an edible, right? Unless it's really, really low dose. And often that's not the case, right? They go out with a 100 milligram THC chocolate bar. We lose that customer. They never come back.
And they can't remember where you were when they bought it.
Exactly. They tell all of their friends, don't ever go here. If you see a chocolate bar, run from it. That's really bad, obviously, right? And so we like to be on the market in the beginning to help combat that.
Have you each found your consumer yet? Do you have an idea? You had mentioned that it's from the 21-year-old to the 94-year-old, whom I'd like to meet at 94 if he's still getting high.
Our core consumer at this particular location is between 45 and 55 years old. But that doesn't mean that's our brand's core consumer in every market. And I think in New York City, it'll be skew much younger than that. But certainly, it's been overwhelming that multi-generational, 3-generational customers coming in together, that really cannabis obviously is for everyone.
And I know, Whitney, that you're the newest on the block, but have you had an opportunity to start to see who is purchasing?
Yeah, I would definitely have to say we're between 25 to 35. We skew a little bit more on the female side, but we do every now and then, when we have the chance to have our product actually sampled to, for example, my grandpa is very in love with our product. I'm sure that's biased because of me. But one of the things that Supr helps him with is his chronic gut pain. And he can't really drink normal coffee anymore. So him and his buddies love to drink it. And so we've actually seen too that when we do get the chance to sample our product to an older generation with that kind of chronic pain or different, health areas that they want to focus in on, we're seeing it really become a staple in their pantry, which is what I'd love to explore further. But for right now, yes, 25 to 35.
I think, to cut back on the acid too, because everybody has reflux these days. You know that between the acidity of wine and all these other tequila, I mean, that'll just kill you. So, and the 3 cups of coffee, it's a lot of acid. So I would assume you're all experiencing that too, that's part of that wellness.
Absolutely.
Darnell, thoughts on who your consumer or customer is?
Yeah, I mean, they're skewing female. They are interested in craft cocktails. They're interested in mixology. You know, I always say CANN is a godsend for us because CANN is introducing people to a low-dose lifestyle. And then we kind of come in the lane behind and we offer a way for you to now experiment more along your journey with cocktails. And so it's a nice compliment. I get a lot of people that say, hey, I mixed, you know, your Jalisco agave with some CANN and it tastes great. I'm like, cool, you know. But yeah, so female, slightly, and definitely into craft cocktail mixology. Probably bullseye is maybe mid-30s. A lot of moms with kids.
Yeah, sure, the moms need it. Why not?
Yeah, so.
Another question, yes. And then we'll get to you, sir.
Thank you. This is more of a Jake and Darnell question. Because of beverages being heavier and being such a small part of the product mix in cannabis, how do you deal with distribution in various markets?
Yeah, it's really challenging. I'm sure it's even worse for you. You know, in some ways, because the cannabis industry is organized the way it is, state by state, and with highly regulated licenses, we're building it from the ground up within cannabis. That may not be the right answer, right? If I'm a regulator, I'd say, why don't you access the existing capital that's already out there? It will help accelerate the industry. And those people are already doing stuff the right way. We know that because we regulate them. We'll see. That's kind of a pipe dream of mine, but it would be great to be able to plug into existing trucks and distribution networks. If you think about the cannabis industry, it's designed to move products that are pretty lightweight and pretty expensive. So like a case of vapes, just think about like how much that would weigh and cost. A case of CANN has 24 cans, and a pallet of CANN weighs over a ton. So we're talking about a completely different set of trucks. I mean, you can't move 8 cases of CANN in a dispensary. Most people, it would take you like an hour. And so those are real challenges. They have to change. They're capital investment challenges. And so the real pivot point for the industry now is like, are we going to build that all up from the ground ourselves, or are we going to find a way to change regulations to allow us to use that capital that's already out there?
Yeah, I'd agree. As you know, it's a challenge for us. We talk to MSOs all the time that talk about the square footage that Beverage takes up versus its sell-through. And it's going to evolve, right? It's going to take the consumer pull to help us.
You're also glass, right? Are you glass?
Yeah, we're glass. Yeah. So we have a whole new set of challenges with breakage, and with the 750 ml format, it's a larger size. And the good news for us is, right, 1 unit of Moon is basically a case of CANN, right? So it's we have a little bit of there, but it's still a challenge. No 2 ways about it. Yeah.
And then this gentleman over here.
Speak loud.
We're going to put you on the mic.
It's a great chat. Thanks for your great perspectives. We have a digital therapeutic, and a lot of our users are acute, suffering from acute maladies, but more and more want to explore cannabis for either prior to exercise as a prehydration and preparation, but also a recovery. These are some professional athletes, but also just regular people working out. Is that an innovation we can see in the future in the beverage category, specifically sports beverages that are cannabis infused, or what's the status of that?
I can
More
kinda
white space.
I know, I can kind of jump in here. Speaking at least from a pre-workout or protein status, it is something that we actually are exploring right now. If you're familiar with pre-workout, it actually has a lot of these different kind of triggers that come through when you take it. So I think when we think about the athlete category, again, I think there is a ton of white space. And I think that as we look at the beverage category moving into maybe more of these powder-based beverages, we can see that, there's an opportunity to actually target these athletes with these chronic health problems. And I would say that it's probably going to be coming very soon.
Another question, yes. With the great specs, well, those are awesome. So the question was about pricing and I guess how do you decide how much to charge?
I'm sure
for
Jake and
something?
I will take this, but the way I look at it is, right now in the industry we see a race to the bottom, right? Most potent, less cost is what people are gravitating towards. But in beverage, we have to sell what else is in the package, right? There is innovation that allows this beverage to taste the way it does that is completely independent of the cannabis. And so that has a value on it, and you have to be able to hold value and explain that to consumers. If you sell it only on the active ingredient, you're always going to be in a price battle because that active ingredient is on its way to becoming a commodity, right? So you have to be able to sell around what else is in the package. And beverage, luckily, has other pieces of the formulation that have nothing to do with the cannabis that deliver the taste and the profile.
And I would think there's an expiration date that that could be working against you as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think piggybacking on that, you're also selling the experience, right? We talk about, yes, a six-pack of CANN in your store in California is going to cost you $18 before tax, probably out the door 24 or something, depending on where it is. That's expensive. It's more expensive than it should be. It needs to come down. The reason it's expensive, though, are more to do with regulations and the industry. But you're getting a cannabis experience for 2 or 3 people for that $24, and that's really important as well. We think consumers want the turnkey. They know how to interact with the can. You crack it open and drink it. There's no like, how much of this do I mix with this and grind this and roll? And that's all to the side. That's really an important part of it as well, I think.
And we try to be price parity with a super premium spirit, right? And what consumers are used to. So as a retailer, you have to be, savvy enough to sell it as such because you're getting 15 to 18 cocktails out of a bottle if you're doing a 2 milligram dose. So when you think of it that way, it's not really astronomical in price. It's pretty on par with like what you'd buy from as an alcohol beverage.
In these last few minutes, I always like to ask, is there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to talk about or anything you wanted to add to that we already have spoken about? Wow, I hit on everything.
I'd say thank you to everyone here, right? This is the faces that are going to power this industry. And, for us to be here and have a chance to share our stories and challenges. And if you guys knew what probably kept Jake and I up at night with logistical challenges, I was just on the phone with a distributor before I walked in here. I'm like, not now, And it's like everything is against us. And our challenge right now is just trying to get liquid to lips because I believe once you get someone to taste the beverage, you have believers. But every rule that's written is against us even getting liquid to lips. So, I implore this group to keep supporting, keep showing up at events like this, and keep powering the industry.
Anybody else? Anything?
The only thing I'll add to that is, this applies more to beverage and food products, but I think that we often forget that these are meant to be enjoyed at the end of the day, right? In all the back and forth about take this at this time and this much and this effect and so focus on that, on the enjoyment factor, on the flavor, the taste,
the experience.
Right? The experience. Right. And remember that brand is part of your product too, right? That's part of the product. We think of product, it's not just the liquid, it's also the brand. And that's packaging, yes, but it's also every other place that your brand appears, what it stands for, what it says about someone when they purchase it.
I think what's important to keep in mind is that there have been decades-long work from greats, all across the country, but from, Allen Ginsberg in the 60s to Harvey Milk, that have advocated and fought to get to where we are or where we're on the cusp of now here in 2022. And I think pushing for an industry that both includes luxury but also equality is important, and I believe that we can have one that's both. And so I think from every facet, that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that was all pretty well said. I think if anything, I look forward to helping everyone and to really expanding what we do, whether it's inside of the cannabis industry or it's looking at things like CBD or different variations. I think there's so many ways that this specific industry can show up and really help our consumers, whether it is enjoyment, whether it's finding your new coveted favorite brand product, or whether it's to feel better.
Well, then I thank you all for being here. I thank the panel for their words of wisdom, and this was great, so thank you.
Thank you.